Carlos.
Clemencia.
Hello. So we have finally been able to, stop for a little bit and take some time to kind of debrief about this awesome project that we just did. So guys out there, Carlos and I partnered, our agencies partnered to create this project that was, it started out as like a business development project, and it turned into this super personal, super amazing, soul-searching project that we called Identity Matters, because it does. So Carlos, let's start reminiscing about like how this all came about.
Yeah, I mean, if we really want to track it from the inception, right? We're kind of tracking our studios, and they're kind of doing their own things on each side there. But I won't bore us with the entire history of it. But we've worked together on a significant project that I put together. And, I hope that we'll be able to share that publicly really soon. But we really clicked, we really aligned on a lot of our vision and missions for our studios, right? In different ways, obviously. So after or during this partnership, I think you might have brought it up, and it was already something that I had on top of mind. And I was like, yeah, we should do something kind of together to really bolster and present, what we're trying to do here. So yeah, it's exciting that it's taking shape and that a lot of it has been already filmed. And I'm excited for it to, come to fruition and get published and talk about it.
Yeah, I think if my memory serves me right, the project that you originally reached out to me for, it was one of the ideas that we had, to just grab people on the street and ask them about what it meant to them to be a Latino and in their Latino experience. But then, the client had other ideas. They wanted to use, specific people. And we are asking some of those questions about their Latino experience, but from, a much, it's a little bit of a different point of view. And they were like, we still like that idea. And also there's a couple of reasons why, at least I thought it was important to do. First of all, it's not really talked about too much. And, when people will see it, you'll see what I mean. And also when we were actually doing the filming, the conversations that we had behind the scenes really told us that these are stories that needed to be told, because people were like, nobody has ever asked me how I felt about the fact that I don't speak Spanish, or that my parents didn't want to teach me Spanish. Nobody has ever asked me how I felt about being different in my school. So it's kind of like these, Latinidad experiences that people sort of interiorize and just keep it to themselves because political environments, or just it's like touchy subjects, and there's so many different reasons. And we were like, no, let's like go in there and dig it up, and like, even if it feels yucky, but then let's also talk about like what we could do with it, right? It's not just like, let's just, bitch and complain about something. It's like, what are we, what are the hopes? Like, what are we seeing from that? What can we learn from that?
Yeah, I think, it's rare when you have a project, and I think it usually comes together like this, right? Where you just sort of take the initiative to do it yourself. But from this need, from this sort of like business need to say, our clients, our prospects, they need to be educated. They need to understand the problem that they're trying to solve, that they're coming to us to help them with. And at the same time, bring this sort of authenticity and this realness and like humanizing, Latinos, right? Which often become others. And there's this sort of feeling of not belonging, but obviously we do, right? We're here, multi-generational, whether we're immigrants or, we've been here, 200 years. I think it's really important. It's a difficult topic to address, right? It's, as Latinos, we're not monolithic. We're not kind of like one size fits all. So it tends to be a complex conversation, and to come together and then do a project like this where we're like interviewing different people. And specifically, right, we went from like, okay, we're going to talk to some young people about education. We're going to talk to some older folks about like their experience and this idea of identity and acculturation, right? That's something that, you're right, when we were in production, when we were filming, you felt it in the room, right? People were like really excited. They were like, oh my God, like, nobody's ever talked to me about that. That created a challenge for us because we had allocated a certain amount of time for the interviews, and there were at least a few of them that were like double that, and we just let it roll, let it keep going. In a way, it becomes very therapeutic for our subjects, right, to get that out.
Yeah.
But at the same time, during that extra time, that somebody really gets comfortable and gets really introspective and starts thinking about themselves and their place. That's when you get those sort of human emotions and feelings. And that's where I feel like there's a lot of connection that can happen for the viewer, right? Where it's not like, oh yeah, this person, has an American flag and, a Dominican or a Colombian flag or a Mexican flag, right? It's like, no, there's different, there's an in between, there's a gradient. And, I get a kick out of that, right? I love that we got to host it, in the studio, and we were able to put that together. I can't wait for it.
There were times in which people had to say, I need a moment because this is like, a lot of things are coming up for me.
Yeah.
And this is where I really think that, we're sort of hitting the mark in trying to tell the clients, like, this is not a nice to have, right? Because this is like, a lot of the conversations that we have with clients, it's like, oh, okay, well, Latinos, yeah, it's like a little piece of the budget. It's like, no, this is not a nice to have. This is a must, because we're hitting some super sensitive notes that if, brands or organizations are hitting, then people are going to be like, they're going to wake up. So like something inside of them is going to wake up and say, look, somebody understands me. Somebody's listening out there, or somebody knows what I'm going through. Like, there were so many times in which like we asked a question and people were just like taken aback, like, whoa, you want to talk about that? Wow, that's... I need a moment, because you just touched a really sensitive chord about my experience. And it's not just like the American experience, it's the experience of being an American, Colombian, Greek person who was raised in a suburb that blah, 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 blah. There's just like so many different, ingredients to that mix. And so, like you said, it's not a monolithic group, and sometimes it can get overwhelming to clients, like, oh my God, how are we gonna target all these different people? But there are some commonalities to our experience. And when we were asking those questions, everybody had a different version of that experience, because we all have that shared experience of the belonging. The belonging is and the identity is a big thing. Like, who am I here? Because I have been trying, I am a little circle trying to fit into a square peg for the whole time. My family has also been trying to fit into the square peg, and none of us are fitting, because my dad is a triangle and my mom is a hexagon, and we're just not fitting well. And I just don't know where we fit in this whole equation. And that is like, I feel like, and you told me, Carlos, what you do, but that was like a common denominator there, this sense of like, where do I belong? Where do I fit?
Yeah, you hit on a couple of topics and points there. I like to first address like the level of acculturation, which I think is sort of how it's addressed, right? Where people that are Latinos that are either from the US, have been here multi-generational, or are first generation, second generation. Within that family unit, you're going to have different experiences, right? And that can feel really isolating. I can tell you as my personal experience, right? I was born in the US, but then I grew up with my grandparents in the Dominican Republic until I was 6, and then moved back to the US, right? There was a level of like, who's here to guide me? Like, who do I ask about financial aid? Who do I ask about, like these big life, choices and things that I have to do. So that can, as a unifying sort of feeling, as an empathy, right? That feeling of being a little lost, a little bit out there, it's something that unites us. And it could be moments like you mentioned where people are really emotional. Suddenly they're, they sign up and they're like, yeah, we're going to talk about this thing. And when they're there and they're saying it, it like just triggers, it just hits, it's just like a ton of bricks, right? And they're like, I need a moment. And some people, like you can only push them so much. They'll tell you like, oh yeah, I was thinking about my dog, and it's like, we let them have that. But then there's the opposite of that, right? Where it's like joyful moments. There was this moment where I had to step out of the room to pick up, a call from my mother. I'm almost 40, but my mother still calls me as much as she can. And I walked back in the room and my mother, I said, my mom called me and she was like, what, you don't have a son? Which is tú no tienes hijo, which is a very common sort of like Latina mother kind of sentiment. And everyone in the room was like, oh my God, my mom called me and says the same thing. So there's like these moments of connections there. And for me personally, and for the studio and what we're trying to do here, I think that's something that's really important. I think sort of setting that vibe, that comfort level. It's not just, like, oh, somebody knows how to speak Spanish. It's more of like, oh, you have to understand the culture, especially when it comes to production, because I've been in production for 15 plus years, right? I'm used to the lights and everything, and I love the gadgets, and you can see all the gack behind me. But
you're very gadget forward, yes.
I am. I love my tech. It's my vocabulary. We've had this conversation. I like tech because it lets me express creatively certain kind of ways. But at the same time, it's, I've worked with people that are 65, 70-year-old that's never been in front of the camera, that have never used a teleprompter, right? And people that, careers, lawyers, that kind of thing. And so how do you get somebody who may be intimidated by all the gadgets, by all the gizmos, to feel comfortable and give something that's, authentic, right? Because ultimately, when you're doing marketing, you want that message to communicate and resonate, right? It's all about the person who's on the other end of the screen. And when it comes to marketing, the best marketing is, segmentation, where you can speak to pockets of specific segments, that you're trying to reach. And thinking of Latinos as just like, boom, there it is. It was in Spanish, rather than like, hey, we're going to have young Latinos that are growing up in America and they're trying to figure things out and they're helping out their parents. And you're going to have, people closer to retirement who may have planned for it, who may try to figure things out. There's a big spread there, and understanding the culture and how that culture fits into greater American culture is super valuable. And I think, it's I don't think it is a nice to have. I think there's a huge, market there, huge economic boosts for, companies, organizations that are trying to reach that demographic, us Latinos.
Totally. And, going back to what you said about making people comfortable, and this is something I say over and over again, having that chain of Latinos that is doing the outreach for the people, because these were real people. These were not actors. They were not paid. These are real people talking about their real experiences. And it's like, who reached out to them? It was a Latino friend of theirs that reached out to them. So our casting director was Latino. He reached out to a bunch of people that he knew. And so it was like that Latino connection. They knew each other from a bachata class. It's kind of like, okay, I can trust this person. And then here comes the director, who is another Latino person. And then here comes the camera operator, who is another Latino person. You walk into the studio and they were playing Bad Bunny, and we were like, playing like merengue, and, we were like speaking Spanglish, and, it was the whole chain from when people were reached out to all the way to the end, that we're just like, we are here to support your experience, and also we're here to uplift it. We're not taking advantage of you, which is a big thing that Latinos say. There's data that says that brands and organizations take advantage, then they put them like on a, this podium, like, look, we have the brown person here. Look, we got someone here, Latino. This is a spokesperson. Here we go. All right, do your thing. Kind of like a dog and pony show.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, we're not doing that. We're here to uplift your experience so people can understand us more, and they can also see, they can also, like you said, they can see that we're another human just with a different experience, and so that's a whole different way of approaching people, and a whole different way of producing something. Because I have seen, because I've also been in production, not in your side of the production, but I've been on the behind the camera, way behind the camera side. And I have seen people just scared to death in front of this camera, and just like not loosening it up, and they don't know what to say because everybody's a stranger. And so it's like, how, from the beginning, when the people are walking in, you sit down, you offer them some cafecito, you sit down with them, you talk to them about, I also had to like give them my own experiences about my own stuff, so they can understand that I am not here to ask them weird questions that, I'm trying to like probe into their lives. It's like, we're all here to talk about our own experiences, and like my experience was like this. And so it's kind of like really taking care of those small details in the pre-production is so important.
Yeah. Before we go on, I got to give a big shout out to Michael. Michael Fells, filmmaker.com, I think is his website, and his Instagram. And Michael, since we met a number of years ago and started working together, he's a director, casting producer. He's a Swiss Army knife. And early on, I had a podcast with him where we talk about this, of like this pipeline of like Latinos in film, not only behind the camera, but in front of the camera, and the challenges that are there, right? He says, if he's casting something that requires a Latino role, or that a Latino would be great for, he has a smaller pool of people because they have been giving less opportunities, right? And when you're putting together a project, you want somebody that has been there before, right? Because there are some risks. You don't want somebody off the street. But so big shout out to Michael who jumped in and said, no, not a problem. I'm going to call the bachata school. I'm going to call the salsa school, right?
He did an awesome job.
He did.
But also from what people were saying, they are saying that whenever somebody wants to cast a Latino, they are asking for a specific look, right? And we wanted to show the opposite, right?
Yeah, I mean, we're full disclosure, we're still, planning on filming a few extra interviews, because we felt like, okay, we had such a wide lens here, but we're missing some pieces here, right? Some parts of demographics there. But this idea that, bringing this many voices within the Latino community together in a project like this, right, between our two studios, that took some doing, and it takes the work, not just the pre-production from like right before we shot, but this idea of like years. I've been having this conversation for years. One of the reasons and the ways we connected, and I admitted to you, it was like a year before I even reached out, I was like, that's an interesting person that's doing some interesting work, right? So that's kind of the legwork that it takes to then have those moments where people can come in front of the camera and feel completely comfortable, right? Because when you're talking about yourself and your identity, you're gonna get a little vulnerable, right? And you don't want the room to be, like really nice people, really professional people. Nobody's saying that, they can't get the job done, but a lot of people leave that experience feeling kind of, like, oh, like I did it, and they may not want to do it again. And I can sort of, I'm not a betting man, but I would say that the people that we brought into the studio, now that they've had this experience, would be like, yeah, I've been in front of the camera before. Like, and I think leaving a mark on our subjects is kind of giving them that confidence that like, this works, your voice is valid, your opinions make a lot of sense. Oh, and by the way, a lot of us share it, even though not as many people know about it. So that's kind of the purpose of a project like this, to be able to kind of push forward.
Yeah, even part of your crew, they came up to the people that were like, I really enjoyed listening to your story. It was so interesting. Or they would say, my mom used to be like that too. It was it didn't even feel like we were working. It just felt like we were in this, I don't know, forum in which we were all sharing some awesome, experiences with each other, and, the off-camera conversations too, having the coffee and talking about, our own families and our own, like, immigration or stories. Like it was so heartwarming. We were working so hard that whole weekend, and I got on the train back from New York, and I felt like my heart was full from the whole weekend, because it was just so heartwarming to hear everyone and to hear everyone share, and also to have everyone feel so comfortable about sharing. And it was going back to the who we were looking for, it was like, no, we're not looking for a specific look. Like we had a 6'3" guy. We had neurodivergent people. We had non-binary people. Mm-hmm. We had, like I mentioned, a Colombian Greek girl. We had like all kinds of mixes, Haitian with another thing. And it was just like, it was such a good mix that we had parents, we had students, and there's sometimes that we put people on camera, and like, I'm sure that some clients out there will be like, oh my God, that's a Latina person?
Yeah.
Or like, that's a Latino person? Yeah, we can also be blonde. We can also be tall. We can have blue eyes. We can be redheads. We can be all kinds of different things. So it's not like casting the typical Latino. It was a little bit of everything, and with all kinds of different styles, We had like a rock and roll guy. We had all kinds of different people, and it was so cool to see, what we've done with this experience all together, and all the different outlooks that everyone has, but also what they are trying to do. There's people that are teaching bilingual, two languages to the children. There's this guy that has an art gallery that is giving opportunities to more Latinos. There's just like so many things that people are doing with their own experience and maybe their own trauma that they're trying to change and trying to bring good things to the world. It just felt so nice.
Yeah, and it does start with the settings, does start with the crew. I've probably shared a lot about like my own background as a, artist turned producer turned like studio owner. One of the things that I've really concentrated on by choice or by luck is culture, right? Culture within the studio. Like, sure, I want people that are like good and nice and friendly and know their stuff and are professionals, but also people that are empathetic, right? Because you can have production can be very stressful, and when things hit the fan, what you want on your side is people that are calm, collected, and empathetic, right? If they see somebody's having a really hard time, like a lot of the crew or people are going to jump in and do that. And so that's one. And two, this wide spectrum of people that we were able to capture, right? That's why I mentioned, I was like, we want to do more because there's so much more, right? You can do a project for a weekend and get a big slice of it. And I think we were really successful in that point. But yeah, talking about the people that we were able to interview, Diego, I actually visited his art gallery, pretty cool space, so I showed up, right? Like, it's not just like, let me use you for your time. It's kind of like, oh, no. These are people you want to
support
yeah. and start a relationship with. And whether they were LGBTQ or neurodivergent. I mean, talk about getting a perspective of culture from people that are, typically put on the margins of it, right? Because they've had time from those perspectives to look inward, right? And then you put them on camera, they're just like, yeah, I've been waiting for this. Here goes, right? And like, we got those perspectives, and like, I was sitting back and I was just sort of listening in, and I just kept nodding. I was like, yep. It was like, how do we put all this like good stuff together is exciting to see how it unfolds. But I think it was super successful. I'm excited for people to see it. I'm excited in terms of the conversations that's going to sort of spark, right? Because bringing it back to something that at its core was, we're going to do sort of business development. Like at its core, it was that, but what it turns into, it's kind of like guarding the authenticity of it, right? It's kind of putting this together to present it and say, no, we want you to listen, like really, really, really listen, and maybe, shift your perspective one way or the other. So then you can be open to, catering to these people to really focus on a message, to really connect, right? To really land, because otherwise it's all noise, right? If you take what you've done in English and translate it into Spanish, often it's not gonna, you're gonna miss something there in the translation, and not just from the Google Translate, but like the culture and everything. But two, it's not gonna land, right? It's just gonna sound like noise. It's people get turned. They told us, our subjects, they told us, we get turned off by that, man. We know.
Yeah, exactly. And that not only, and I think like just to add to what we were trying to do with this series is, it's not only that to show the authenticity, but also the importance of working with a Latino team when you are trying to communicate with Latinos. And, not mentioning any names, but there's a lot of groups that don't have Latinos in their teams that they're like, oh no, we're all set here. We know what we're doing. And maybe, hey, you probably have a lot of experience in marketing, maybe even more than we do. But the experience in the culture, the experience that we have is just not something that you go to school for. It's something that you live. It's something that is inside of you. It's something that, you go to Christmas and you experience it with your family. It's a lived experience. It's not a learned experience.
I am going to echo that, and I'm going to say that you almost don't even have to be Latino to have that experience if you have lived it, right? So my best friend, Eric, who I've known since the 3rd grade, he's from Africa, right? He's from Ghana. And I joke with him all the time. I was like, Eric, you're part Dominican. At this point, you've sat at my dinner table so many times. Like he's married to a Dominican woman, right? So it's like kind of like, but this idea of like lived experiences, right, where you understand the values, the culture, how to navigate things, even the warmth, right? Even in business interactions, right? There's sometimes when I'm in a lot of corporate room settings and meetings where I just have to be quick and to the point. And I was like, that's kind of corporate America. But when you're talking with a Latino, they're like, we're going to spend 15 minutes talking about, how we're doing, how's your mother, how's your, how's your grandfather? And that is something that is just as important. Because even as Latinos, we make that mistake when we're switching one way to the other, where, if you jump right in, it's a little off-putting, and it kind of just sort of sets the tone for closing in. So it is a lived experience. It is kind of living in 2 worlds, at least for me, but also really celebrating what it is to be in one side or the other, right? And that's from thinking of a project like this from like a personal point of view. It's like, it's like, I want to do more work where that's all we're doing. We're celebrating culture, the differences, and what that brings to the table, right? What that brings when you're shifting your business, plan to cater a little bit more, or campaign to like really reach out, because you either have a service or product, or you're helping a certain, demographic. So, oh man, I get it.
And also visually uplifting it. I mean, I mean, one of the things that I loved about, working with you, I sensed from the very beginning that you were very technically, you're technically forward and also very gadget forward. And some of the tests that you were showing me that you were just like playing around in the studio and doing that, I was like, that looks amazing. And I was so impressed by the quality of the quality that you were always striving for and the new things that you want to try. You're like, let's go get this projector and let's go this and let's go this that. And let's go, you really wanted to really not just like show some people in front of some building and, have them talk. It was like, let's make this visually stunning. I mean, to the point that we had these shots on the TV because we were like all watching it because I was hiding behind this, this thing. Like, I was interviewing people, so because there was so much stuff in like equipment, and so I was looking at it, and people were just going like, "Wow, that looks amazing," and they did. It looked so cool. We were all taking pictures of the TV because it like just the way that their faces look. They look so heroic. They look so like empowered and just like I'm getting goosebumps just like thinking about it because they look so cool. And it wasn't just like, let's just grab that, this person, let's grab this person and make them look amazing. And like the B-roll that you were trying to do with like all this like, the rotation of the camera and you were just trying to do so many cool things. And that was one of the reasons why I said, I want to do this with Carlos.
Yeah.
And 10 by 10. It's not just like anybody else. Because I've had this idea for a long time too. And it's like, it just has to be with the right partner.
My Latino superpower, after doing this for so long, is that you kind of have to be 10 times better than the next guy. And I'm like, fine. Mm-hmm. Not a problem. Here I am, right? So I always approach something with not just like, oh, it would be nice, but even, before we jumped on, you saw me tweaking all the lighting. And in my head, I'm like, let's get it just right. But that came from early in my career, right? So I used to work as a freelancer, as a contractor for a hospital system here in the Bronx, in New York. And we were doing a lot of like annual reports and that kind of thing. So I'm talking to the chairman of, surgery and then the custodian. And I shot them both the same way. I did the lighting the same way. And one of the things that I really liked about that job is they had a Christmas party at the end of the year, and they took everyone as like a sense of appreciation, and they got their portraits taken. And, and I made sure that I was shooting this with like medium format and the best lighting and the soft boxes and reflectors, just so the image could just be exquisite. Because what that does is it provides a level of dignity to the person, yes. Right? So I saw these workers, this workforce as like my community, right? They're working in my community in New York here. And I was like, okay, I don't care if like you're sweeping the floors. Like, I want you to look uplifted and dignified. And that is something that it was a personal thing, right? It wasn't like a business decision. It was just like, no. You're going to look really, really good. This may be one of the best photos or videos that you've ever been on. And that's just how I approach it, right? Like, I'm meticulous. I wear many hats in the studio, both as a creative and as an executive. And it's interesting because sometimes I have to, as the executive looking at the, the line items, I have to get the creative in check and be like, oh, no, this is a business. But I do still approach it with that sense of like wonder and playfulness and this idea of like crafting image and play, right? Having someone on monitor, that's also one of my secret weapons because it's a little theatrical. Like, I'm putting on a show, right? Like, that's also my Latino superpower. Like, I don't have a big ego, but I can be a little bit like showy. So like, I'm gonna put my image on the monitor, and you're gonna see me craft and put it together. And the reason I'm doing this is because whoever's in front of my camera, I'm celebrating, I'm uplifting, I'm polishing.
And people were so excited to get on camera because the person that was going before them was looking so amazing. they were like, well, I want to look like that too.
Yeah.
And, you know, and I really think that this is where you and me click, because I'm also super exigente, you know, when it comes to the quality in, with, you know, you can ask all the people that work for me. That, you know, we will do 100 iterations if it's necessary, you know, in order for it to look right. And like, that was me when I used to sit down and edit, and I used to sit down and do motion graphics. Like, I was an artiste, you know, and like everything needed to be very artistic, and it, like, and like you said, as a Latino, you have to be much better than everyone around you, because otherwise you're not gonna get the opportunity. Yeah. And so, you know, it was like, back when I was doing 3D, it was like I needed to be the best 3D artist. Then when I was doing After Effects, I needed to be the best After Effects artist. It was really, and you know, to the point that if the people that were watching the work that I was doing were not like, wow, this is a work of art, then I didn't do my job. And so it's like, I think this is where you and me connected. We're like, and I loved the, you know, the sessions that we had together about like brainstorming on like what we're doing. But then we, you know, then I went to New York a day before, and we really sat down and we were like, what are the colors that we're using, and what are and like, that was just such a cool session that we had, planning what, you know, what the studio was gonna look like for all these people, and you, like, we were like, you know, feeding off of each other, and then you were like, well, technically this is you know, what we could do, and then I was thinking about like what it would look like in post, and you know, it was just like, it's just a super cool process in which like both, like, two creative people that just really are super caring about the, not just the quality, but the concept and the product, and also just really caring about the topic that we were talking about. Like, you can really see the love that we put into it, because it was so important to us that these stories are not just told, you know, in just whole. They're told in a amazingly visually rich way that, you know, if you're watching this on mute, you could be like, that looks freaking awesome.
Yeah. I mean,
let me listen to what they're saying, because that looks awesome.
It brings you in. So I have something in the studio that I call a visual hook, right? We all know about like when with social media content and things like that, you want something to hook people in within those. And I was like, all right, well, I can do that visually, because the image is going to look great. The concept, the colors are going to really pop. But, you know, talking about sort of our collaboration and finally getting to do something like that, we should really talk about, you know, spaces and what that means, right? Because operating in a space where, you know, between our two studios where we're very comfortable, we're very aligned, you get this kind of work product, right? You get that. And when it comes to like having to work 10 times, 20 times harder, you know, as somebody that has to employ, you know, people, freelancers, contractors, that kind of thing, you know, I've realized that a lot of it comes from your own network, right? And then there's been times where, you know, those opportunities haven't been afforded to us, right? So we have to be that much better, because we, you know, like we're here, we're at the table. It's really good. You should want this, even if we don't know each other. But you know, what's really exciting about something like that is that there are now a handful of opportunities where you do get to work with Latinos that are in those decision-making, you know, spaces. And when you arrive at those spaces to work with them, the synergy, the work is just through the roof, right? And that at least in my career, I've noticed that there's times where you're like, the vendor other, and you're under a lot of scrutiny, and there's just times when like, yeah, the work is good and you have to prove yourself, but like all of a sudden there's a deeper connection there, right? It's like all of a sudden, like, you know, the corporate speak is not 100%, it's like maybe 90%, right? You get to say a little something in between there. And I hope, you know, clients, I haven't asked for their feedback, but I think they enjoy it. But like, that's the way where I'm going to make my best work, is if I feel comfortable and I'm allowed to take space, not only as a creative, number one, as a creative, right, as a crafter of image, but also, you know, as a Latino in the arts and, you know, in production. And that is really what I enjoyed about our collaboration, right? It's like we had been working on this other project together, but like we got together and we were like, this is our project. And we had a lot of complementary things that we brought to the table, right? Like with you, I said, okay, run with the concept, with the idea, with the messaging, with like what we need out of this project. You were able to do that. And then I went and I ran with the logistics of like, let's make sure we have the crew and everything like that. And once those pipelines were set, then we got to play a little bit, right? That time, the day before the shoot, we got to be like, just our minds, you know, as creatives went wild. But, you know, that's kind of what it took to put a project together like this. And it's not rocket science, but once you have this formula, right, like I'm not done with you in Moira Studio. I hope you guys know that we're gonna continue doing some awesome work together. But yeah, you know, it's satisfying to be able to, you know, put things like that together. And I don't know if, you know, your viewers here on the podcast will get from like this big smile that I have on my face. Like, it actually makes a difference. It makes a difference in the product itself. At the end of the day, what you get, whether they're photos, whether they're videos, campaigns, whatnot, when you put things like this together.
Yeah. And you know, you said something really interesting, that, you know, when now there's Latinos in positions of power where they can make decisions to hire other Latinos, you know, it's really funny when I've had those experiences that they're so pleasantly surprised that we're so organized and structured and so like punctual with all the deadlines, and because we have such a bad rap about like being disorganized and late and whatever. And it's just like, that was not my experience with you, right? Or like, you know, I have Viviana, our ops manager, who is like the most structured, punctual person that you will ever meet. And so it's like, this is the kind of, it's not just like good visual quality. It's like, we're so strict with like our deadlines and with our timelines and with keeping the budget. And, you know, it's just so important to us to do that. And that really showed when we were working together. It's like, oh, it's not like, oh, you know, so many times that you're doing things for free for people, it's just like, oh, it gets lost in the ether. And it's like, no, it doesn't matter that we're, you know, we're both paying our part for this, but it's like, but it's also really important to us. So we're going to keep our deadlines, we're going to keep our timelines, and we're going to get organized. And then I'm going to do my part of the deal, we're going to do this part of the deal. And it's like, we made it a priority too. It wasn't like, oh yeah, it's so nice to have, we'll someday do it. No, it's like, it's another project. And it was really important to do that. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I've always expressed, I feel like, while we're doing professional work here, I feel like Moira Studios has like a tight ship. And I know there's a lot of really incredible women in your organization running it, and including yourself. So I'm always like, wow, you know, like, so I always appreciate that. But also, Moira just hit, you know, 10 years, right? Like it comes with, you don't make it past 5 years without getting things really, really tight and organized. And, you know, even opportunities like this where it's like, okay, we're collaborating on something, you know, you could dial it in, but why even do it? Why bother? Why get out of bed on a weekend, you know, to film and invest in something like this? And, you know, I'll tell you, because it's something that I've had to really think a lot about. It's sort of like why really focus as a studio, right? And something like this. And my studio, that 10 by 10, we have different avenues, but like this is a core that has always been there. That's just developed organically as something that we see that needed to be addressed in productions. And I think it's sort of this vision, like what kind of world do you want to see, right? It's like, I want to see, and I have, two very young children right now. Like, I want a world where like it's normal for a Latino that looks like me, right? That looks like the grip when I show up on set, right? That right? He's the one in charge, right? That's no big deal. That's normal, right? And then that...
Yeah, you mentioned that to me.
Yeah, that's happened more than once where like I can show up and I can either come at that with like wearing a suit to set, which is totally not me, or I can just be myself, and it melts away very quickly. Within 5-10 minutes of me arriving and working with a client, they get it. And it's like, okay, but those little things where it's like,
I've shown up to pitches and they're like, so did you start the company when you were in school?
It feels right now in terms of my mission, that fuels me. Those interactions are just like, okay, so it has to be 15, 20 times better. But at the same time is, okay, what, where does the studio, where does the industry, where does, all of this lead to 10 years down the line, right? And I hope that it's a place where like, it's a little bit more normalized. And I'm seeing that with like the generation coming, and they're doing their own thing and then their own way. And not many will follow the path of like starting a production studio, that kind of thing, right? But normalizing this idea that like, Latinos that look like this can do this. Latinos are, professionals. We can
deliver things on time.
We
can be on time.
To the next.
We can deliver really high quality work.
Yeah.
And it's like sometimes it's not even our fault about the high quality work. It's like some people just haven't had the opportunity to get the education or the opportunities to practice to like get really great at what they're doing.
I've had many failures.
Oh yeah.
You have to survive it. You have to, and that's again kind of like putting this idea of like, like as Latinos, maybe a lot of us don't come from a place where we can withstand mistakes and errors. Right?
They could be fatal.
Yeah, they absolutely can. And I've out of luck and just sheer determination of like, this is what I want to do and this is what I'm going to focus on, is one of the reasons why, I think our studio started in 2011. So we're like 12 years in, very similar sort of track there. But it could change, and it's going to be great when it does. And I'm excited about the future.
I mean, I'm still terrified that, if something could end my career at any point. There's still not any day of the at all that I'm just like, oh, I got this. No, I'm always just terrified. And, it's not that I'm saying that I make things out of fear, but there's still like that underlying thing of like, I'm still not good enough to some people, just because of who I am, because I'm a woman, because I'm a woman of a color, because I have an accent, because of all these other things, because I have curly hair. I don't know what people are thinking, but there's that sense of fear in the back of your head, like, will this, if we make this small mistake, will it end our career? Yeah. Will it end my business? Everything that I built doesn't matter. That kind of thing. And it's scary, but at the same time, I mean, I don't know. I wouldn't have it any other way. I have a real problem with authority, so only owning a business was my only way.
Yeah. I mean, it's super interesting because I had a vision for my path, right? And it really came down to not finding those opportunities, not finding those open doors, right? And always feeling that you're not good enough, right? It took me a really long time from small crew solo shooter to like, hey, this is actually really good. I'm going to invite everyone in. And now it's a bigger production studio because of that. And this idea that, you're always fearful. Yeah, after every like big production, I need a couple of days off. The level of stress, and like I'm in the studio loading the truck with people just to make sure that nothing gets left behind, right? I'm the first one in, last one out. And it just talks to sort of like work, that ethic and culture, and a deep desire to continue doing this work. But it does take a lot. And at the end of the day, I wouldn't have it any other way. But, I'm glad that there are other islands, other studios like yours that sort of have similar experiences, and combining like this was a big win, big win. And I'm excited what we'll be able to put together sometime.
I'm super excited about what else we're gonna do together, and actual, projects that we get paid for together. And no, in all seriousness, it has been such a joy to work with you in both paid and in our mutual endeavor. And I've loved what we created. I feel like what we're doing is super exciting, super awesome, and I'm super proud of what we're working on, and I can't wait for people to see this, and I can't wait to hear people's reactions, and I also can't wait to see like prospect client reactions about it, see what they think. And yeah, it's thank you for reaching out to me a year ago about this other project, and for indulging in me in this crazy amazing project that we're doing together.
Yeah, no, I mean, graciously, you're welcome, and also thank you, because for me to reach out to someone who, you guys are already doing your own thing, right? At a certain level, that's like, suddenly I'm bringing you in and then say, hey, help us out with, let's collaborate on this. That's a bit of a risk sometimes. And I think this was a major win, right? To be able to find like-minded collaborators that are operating kind of at the same level, kind of creative and executive, right? And it's like, wow, what such energy. And I know we keep sort of dancing around it, but like this project that we've been working on is going to come out really soon, and I'm going to drum it up and like put it everywhere and like put it up and have us all take a bow. I keep telling people, I was like, this is Miami. I know, I have a feeling. Yeah.
You heard it here first.
What's that?
You heard it here first.
Yeah, you gotta sort of put your goals up there like that, right? You gotta put it on the podcast. You gotta sort of think about it that way, because there's a reward after so many years of the work and the development of the work, right? It wasn't always that I had a studio. It wasn't always that I had access to the best cameras and lightings and things like that, But once I got there and really then focused on the work, and then focused on how the work is produced, right? This idea that like your crew matters, your set really matters, right? Especially when you're doing work with Latinos around identity, right? And then like, that is kind of the special sauce, right? Like that's what makes 10 by 10 Studios a little bit different than the next production company, right? Like it's not the whiz and the bang and the technology it's like, as a leader, sort of setting the table for my team to then be able to deliver something special to the client is something that, I invited you, and you were gracious and amazing and brought your talents, and that's why I think we keep moving in this amazing direction. Obviously not exclusively, but man, let's see how many we can put together as a team here.
Yeah, I mean, it just gives I've always wanted to collaborate, and it's hard to find other Latinos in the industry, that, as we mentioned, that are operating in this kind of space, and also they're interested on working on Latino stuff, because there's also a little bit of shame or drawbacks about like, oh, do I am I really gonna come out with like, oh, I'm coming forward with like, oh, I'm a Latino production company? That is like a fear that a lot of people have, and so it's I always wanted to collaborate, and it's and so this is super great, and I love it, and I really hope that we also get to collaborate with other other agencies that do different things. In the podcast, we had somebody else that owned an advertising agency. His name is Ramon, and he does digital marketing, and he was talking about how to speak to your kids in Spanish, and it was such an awesome episode. But it was also like behind the scenes, we're like, yeah, man, let's partner up, and he fills in the spaces that I don't, you fill in the spaces that I don't, and vice versa. It's sort of like, I've said it before, if we are not doing things together, I don't know how we're gonna get ahead. Yeah. Because like, if we're always just like, because that's what they want us to do. They want us to like fight each other for crumbs of bread and things like that. It's like, no, let's do things our way together, how we think that they should be done, and maybe they'll start listening.
Yeah, I think it's in the capitalistic society that we work in, like, let's build it, let's make it as good as it can be. I love collaboration, and collaboration can be a little intimidating. Like I say, like, it was a risk saying like, but it came from things like this, from your podcast. I was like, oh, no, I got a pulse here. I get it. But I would volunteer maybe this summer, having a little networking event of like Latino, like in marketing, or like in media and the arts, that kind of thing. Because similar to Boston, you guys are up there. New York is such a hub for so much talent.
You guys have more people.
So much talent, and I think we all need to get in the same room and network and talk and geek out. And maybe dance afterwards, right? That's usually how a Latino power party happens. And then get kicked
I
out
can
of
do
the
the
venue.
salsa. I don't know about the bachata. I'm not that great.
I'm mostly a two-step kind of guy, but I can throw down. But I encourage it. I mean, not between us, but if anybody in your audience is thinking like, I should think of more collaborations, just do it, right? And
yes.
It could be something like we did together. It's just a little collaboration where we're both sort of gonna, be talking with the same voice, with the same message, or it could just be recognizing that's a missing piece that we don't have in my shop, right? And partnerships are really awesome. I encourage them.
Yes, and to help each other grow and to help each other learn, and like that to me is like so enriching. Even if we don't get the Emmy.
Fine, I'm prepared for not getting the nomination or getting, the tuxedo and showing up and then having my heart broken. But even if it's not the Emmy, good work.
Yes,
gets more good work. And
good work.
if I'm going to keep doing this for another 20, 30 years, I want it to be good, and I want it to be fun, and I want to keep enjoying it.
Fun. We did have fun.
This turned into such a good sort of feel good messaging, conversation, because it has felt like that, right? There's been a lot of times where we're like putting together the briefs and the decks, and we're like, man, this hits home. This is important work.
Totally. And if it hits us, it has to hit people out there. And that's the thing. Like, if people are so excited to share about it, I'm sure they're excited to hear about it too, because it hits something in them. So, if people out there, the brands and the organizations of the world, they're like, oh, look, we have all these Latino goals. What do? You gotta hit those feels.
Yeah.
Just like you hit the feels. I mean, I've seen some ads lately that I'm like, oh, that hits the feels. But you gotta hit the Latino feels. And so what do you need to hit the Latino feels? More Latinos working with you. So with that, I will leave it like that, unless you have so many closing words.
No closing words. This is your stage. Thank you for inviting me to have this conversation. I was excited about it. Obviously, And I hope your listeners get a little something out of this. And I'm looking forward to sharing all the work that we've been putting together.
Yes, I can't wait. I can't wait to show you guys. All right. Thank you, Carlos, so
You're
much.
welcome.
This was so awesome. What an awesome! We could just talk about this for hours, but we will leave it like this, and then we will talk offline and complain about our mother some more. Que tú no tienes madre.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Monica.
All right. Thank you.
Bye-bye.